A fragmented Friday in Albert Park, a red light in FP1, the first session due to, of all things, a GPS drama. And in the afternoon, rain halfway through the session, or a little bit more than half, meant that everyone was out in intermediates and there was no real hope of any serious long runs. But some conclusions to be drawn. Let's have a look at what happened at the beginning of FP2 in the dry runs before the rain started. And this to the backdrop of an FP1, as I say, punctuated by a 10-minute red light due to a GPS drama. I'll get onto that in a minute. And characterised by Max Verstappen again being super quick out of the box. Interesting that he was on the soft tyre, pretty logical on a street course, which is very, very green at that point, is obviously going to pick up grip. Why wouldn't you want to be out on the soft tyre? And Max was. But it's an interesting trend that Red Bull in general, in an FP1, particularly in an FP1, seem to run against the norm, or have been running against the norm in terms of compound choice. Obviously that's related to the tyres they've chosen in the first place, but a logical tyre choice, I think, for Max Verstappen, or for Red Bull in FP1. Sergio Perez, got to say, didn't get in a red tyre run because he lost the back end. The track was green, and so his time was a medium tyre time. Max was the only driver to get under the 1:19 barrier, and he did so on his third flying lap, 1:18.7. But the outstanding thing about that, the takeaway from FP1, was again the top speed of the Red Bull tied to the lap time it was doing, 322, 324 kilometres an hour. And for reference, George Russell, 19.6, 313 kilometres an hour. So out of the box, as I say, Red Bull again continuing where they left off in Saudi Arabia with that astonishing top speed advantage tied to their lap speed as well. So really, really impressive FP1. So let's have a look at what happened at the beginning of FP2 when they had that relatively short run in the dry. Most people by the top speed generally running relatively light. Fernando Alonso 18.8, really good lap in the Aston Martin. Charles Leclerc 19.3, Max 19.5, 3.23. But when he did the 19.5, the quicker lap, in 3.15 top speed, which suggests that he had a drama, maybe traffic, something like that. So not a representative time, really. I'm not saying we can read very much into that, apart from that 3.23 from Max again, just highlighting how good the Red Bull is in a straight line. Call it aero efficiency, I do anyway, and just did a really good job. The teams in general bring quite a lot of new parts to this race, new front wings, floors, etc. Standard procedure at this point of the season. And some changes, some improvements, and most teams reporting some sort of improvement. But Mercedes kind of going round in circles. George Russell doing a 19.6, equaling the time he did in the morning, but doing it on medium rather than soft. So you've got to say that's an improvement. But Lewis Hamilton, who was pretty quick after 6 laps on the soft tyre in FP1, got a reasonable setup on the car. They made changes to his car and he went backwards. He was on the hard tyre, but 20.2. He wasn't particularly happy with the car after that. Then came the rain, and there's a sort of mini cameo at this point, I think, of a couple of situations within teams. A lot of the runners, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, didn't really put in any sort of flying laps. Sergio Perez, but they all went out, interestingly, which suggests that everybody's thinking very changeable weather in Melbourne, better at least get out and do 1 lap, if not 2 laps, even if it's coming back into the pits on the intermediates. But some teams, McLaren being a very good example, did a lot of laps in the wet, and that was good to see. Oscar Piastri had never been to Albert Park before, as same with Logan Sargent. Logan Sargent didn't get out in the second session at all due to an electrical problem, but Oscar Piastri had a very good morning, was quick straight away, obviously sim work, and he got straight into it. And then in the afternoon, when it rained, they put on the intermediates on the McLaren. He was just out there, didn't really seem to make any mistakes at all, apart from second last corner when a lot of drivers just got into a mega understeer in the second last corner, very slippery there. But he just went quicker and quicker and quicker. And every time Lando went out, and the McLaren wasn't too bad. McLaren seems to be a more drivable car, if nothing else, than it was in Saudi Arabia. Whenever Lando went out and did a time, Oscar would immediately reply, 1 or 2 tenths quicker. As I say, there's a little bit of a cameo going on there. That may not be reflected as the season develops, but it will be irritating for Lando Norris every time he did something reasonably good in the car that Oscar Piastri just went a little bit better. So very, very good performance by Piastri. And here are the times in the wet. And you can see there Piastri 28.1, which he did right at the end. Alex Albon, no real surprise to see these guys going well in the wet because the top guys weren't out there doing flying laps, but Alex Albon also very good in the Williams 28.4. Yuki Tsunoda 29.7. Inevitably, he'd be quite quick. Valtteri Bottas, Mr. Consistency, Mr. get the job done, 30-0. Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, very, very similar in performance in the wet for a while, until Nico put in that lap right at the end. He really is good in the wet, showing his talent again over one lap. And George Russell, 32.9, compared with Lewis, 33.6, reflecting that Lewis wasn't very happy with the car in the second session, and George was happier. As I say, Mercedes sort of going around in circles. When one driver likes it in FP1, another driver likes it with a different setup in FP2, you know the team is sort of going round and round the sweet spot of the car, and they're not really making any progress in any direction. They're making progress in terms of drivability, but in terms of downforce and actually making the car more aerodynamically efficient, we got to wait. And Fernando's another example of it. I didn't go out and do a time in the wet. So again, take all those with a pinch of salt. I think the main thing is Oscar Piastri and how confident he was. And obviously this is a big weekend for him. Lots of fans there. I mean, McLaren merchandise suddenly going through the roof. Everybody's wearing orange. Nice to think of that, actually, in terms of the heritage of McLaren, Bruce McLaren, Gulf orange. But, and this is all getting behind Oscar. And it's kind of a, I don't know what the word is, ironic, I suppose, to see advertisements around Danny Rick, as they like to call him here, in his Red Bull kit again, saying, "You're home, Daniel," things like that. "You're back home, welcome home," back to Red Bull, in other words. But what a shame he's not driving it, because, I mean, here's a guy with a great personality, the fans love him in Australia, no doubt about it. And there he is being, just standing around in the garage. Bit of a waste, but there you go. We know the story there. So getting back to the GPS issue, yeah, lots of bunching anyway in the Albert Park lap. The lap lends itself to people slowing down over those last two corners. And because they're 90-degree corners, there's a lot of traffic there's going to be a lot of traffic in Q1 for sure, because everybody waiting to get a gap. It's going to be like Monza, and quick guys who go out early might find a lot of traffic in the way. And that was very much the case in FP1, ridiculously so. It turned out that there was a problem with the GPS, so the teams were not able to tell their driver exactly where the car was coming, the quicker car was coming, if they were on a slow lap, and it was difficult for the organisers as well. But it's, I don't know, maybe I've been around too long. I was talking to a couple of older gentlemen in the paddock afterwards, involved with Formula One teams, got to say, and they were all saying, why did they stop practice for that? Because, we've done it in the past. We raced for hundreds of years, if you like, without GPS, and if that's what happens, we've only got 1 hour, don't stop and take 10 minutes out of the practice session just to reset the GPS. Tell everybody to look in their mirrors and know that you've got to be careful before you pass. And that's what used to happen in Formula One. But, you can't really do that, I suppose, because too many different systems are in place. And so they had to lose 10 minutes while all that was sorted. But I thought I'd say that only because, it's just it's an example of how good Formula One is and how efficient it is until something goes wrong. And then everything just grinds to a halt. So, yeah, the takeaways: the Red Bull, again, phenomenally quick over the lap, and it has that huge top speed advantage. And the other thing I think we can take away from today is McLaren looking a little bit better, but Oscar Piastri, in his first appearance in front of his home crowd in a Formula One car, on a circuit he's never driven before, albeit his home track and albeit a lap he's obviously driven on the sim a million times, looked really good from beginning to end and was very quick in the wet. So overall, good to be in Melbourne. An additional DRS this year on the quick section out the back. And I think that's because the powers that be are beginning to realise that the aero changes made to the car over the winter, the new regulations, small changes, but nonetheless made the aero a little bit more aggressive to get rid of the baseline of the porpoising, mainly. Has actually made it more difficult, not dramatically so, but has made it more difficult now to follow another car, more difficult than it was in 2022. Much less porpoising, much less drama there, and in that sense the regulation changes have worked. But as a result, there's more turbulence, and because of that, maybe that's why they put in the additional DRS in Albert Park here. There were a lot more overtakes last year in 2022 compared with the previous decade or whatever, but I think there was a bit of a worry that it would be more difficult to overtake on a circuit like this if they didn't do that. So we'll see how that works out. Apart from that, the circuit pretty much the same, and the weather disappointing really at the moment, cold and wet, and you come to Australia and you just want blue sky and sunshine, don't you? But that's not happening. Everyone was talking afterwards about how good it was when Australia was the last round of the championship at a beautiful time of the year, albeit in Adelaide, But that can still happen, couldn't it? Because it'll happen in Melbourne. Why don't we make it the last round, get great weather in November, December? Because it's not even the opening round now, it's round 3. So it should be something. It's such a great race. And so we'll see what happens there. Took a long time getting out of the tracks, a lot of traffic here, all the road closures and everything else. I got the tram yesterday, Thursday, and it was just like elbow to elbow, elbow into eyeball. I'm wearing a mask, of course. Well, I was. Nobody else seemed to be. And getting out today in the car, it was, you know, a lot of traffic as well. But here we are in the hotel room doing this, and I'll do another one tomorrow. See you then.